I do some consulting work on American
feeling in the room was
You
palpable.
don't ever say to her that
What about the Chautauqua Institute?
Introductory discussion on the ethical
We laugh.
more of a community.
Before China took back over.
Currently doing in autism.
The New York Times called her the green power broker. Majora Carter is an internationally renowned urban revitalization strategist, real estate developer, and Peabody Award-winning broadcaster. She's responsible for the creation and successful implementation of numerous green infrastructure projects and policies. We'll talk with her about how we can bring economic diversity back into America's communities and why it matters. Here's our conversation with Majora Carter. Majora Carter, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
There is a quote on the website of the eco consulting group that you started. It goes this way: I believe that you shouldn't have to leave your neighborhood to live in a better one. Tell us a little bit about the South Bronx, which is where you grew up.
Sure. Growing up there, we were the poster child for urban blight. Years of financial disinvestment made it so that the buildings were torched or the landlords committed arson in order to collect insurance money because there wasn't any kind of financial
incentive to
No,
fix them.
Not at all. Between the highway construction boom and, and the financial disinvestment, we lost about 600,000 people in the borough at the time, which was an extraordinary number. And it wasn't uncommon to walk down streets and see nothing but abandoned buildings on either side of you and shuttered businesses. And it did send a chilling effect through the community, but I think also those of us that were left who couldn't leave, because my father, for example, bought the house in the 1940s, so he couldn't leave because that's what we owned and we couldn't sell it. So we stayed, and a lot of families were like that. So I think by necessity, we kind of had to
He wasn't
together.
A renter like so many other people were.
Exactly. But again, the land wasn't worth anything, really, so we couldn't just leave. So we stayed.
You've said that self-image is influenced by our surroundings. Mm-hmm. And I think most of us who were raised in nice places never even give that much thought.
No, you take it for granted.
So
absolutely.
I'm wondering what message your surroundings sent to you and how you saw yourself as someone with so much more potential than the image that was being broadcast to you.
Well, the message that it sent to me was that if I stayed, I would be as worthless as the surroundings around me, because I knew how we were perceived. I mean, my neighborhood was on the nightly news as a place that nothing good ever came from. And so I figured I could use education to reinvent myself, which I did. And I went to one of the best high schools in New York City, actually the country. In fact, I went to a great college.
Wesleyan University.
Mm-hmm, and it was all about me developing into something that was as far away from the South Bronx as I could possibly be.
And in fact, you went back to this hometown that you vowed never to go back to when you started graduate school. You needed money, and the cheapest place to go was home. What was it like when you returned home?
I felt like a failure, a complete and utter failure. Here I, reinvented myself. I got a BA, I'm getting an MA, and I have to go back, live with mommy and daddy in this place that I really didn't want to be in. It felt like a tragedy, but it was still the best thing in the world that ever happened to me.
You looked at the community in a way with fresh eyes, and there's this great story that you actually told when you gave one of the inaugural TED Talks back in 2006 about this abandoned dog that you adopted that kind of led you to what turned out to be a river waterfront. Explain what happened.
Sure. It was also the education and having some distance from the South Bronx that made me realize it wasn't all that I thought it was.
And that it could be something else.
Exactly. So knowing that we were perceived as a place where we could be dumped on, and it was a really icky thing to be from this place, getting this crazy dog at the same time, there was this little pot of money that the U.S. Forest Service was about to give out to support Bronx River restoration projects. And my dog pulled me into what I thought was just another abandoned dump, within the community.
You didn't even really know that there was a river right in front of it.
I knew it was a dump, and I didn't know what was at the end of the dump. But fortunately, this crazy 80-pound dog pulled me, and I realized that we have a river, and this could be a transformative moment and location for this community to see itself in a very, very different way. So for me, it was all about how do you address a need in the community for it to feel as though it does have something to look forward to, that it does have value by creating a physical space that reflected well on the people in the community.
At the same time, Mayor Giuliani and the governor, Governor Pataki, had their eyes on the South Bronx for yet another garbage dump. More of the city's, Manhattan's commercial garbage they wanted to send there. The first thing you did was organize some of your neighbors in protests.
Yeah, we had to be very creative. We definitely engaged in some advocacy work. We were part of a citywide coalition advocating for more sustainable ways to handle waste in the city. Reuse, recycle, reuse, and all that great stuff. But at the same time, we had to do something to mobilize people in the community who were, in many cases, just straight up demoralized. And so we had to think of creative ways to do it. And one of the most fun things we did was actually organize a garbage parade where we worked with some folks from the community artists in the neighborhood who created these like really funny costumes that symbolize different types of garbage, and just paraded down the community as a way to get people to just look at them. And it was a really funny kind of moment where people were just like, why are you doing this? And it would be open up this wonderful dialogue to talk to people about what was really happening.
Ultimately, though, you decided that protesting isn't what you're about, what you want to do, and really you turned to investment. Really, you said, instead, I'm going to buy stock in companies and influence their decisions.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, always trying to think creatively about how you can inspire change in a way that's really going to provide some movement. So shareholder actions was something that we'd heard about, and a great ally of ours worked with us and got these essentially this group that they were a group of nuns, and they were like nuns with stocks. They were hilarious. And and what they would do is they would work with different community groups and help them become investors in these companies and do these shareholders actions. And so we got to know them, and they were like, yeah, we can help you do this, absolutely. And so we bought stock, it's just 50 shares, in one of the largest polluters in the community, this or called the New York Organic Fertilizer Company. And they wanted to expand, and it was just like, this is just not appropriate. And we issued just a little resolution. We didn't do any major action at all. We just put it out to all the shareholders, essentially asking them, wouldn't you like the company that you hold stock in to be a really good neighbor? And without any other action than that, almost 40% of the shareholders said, yeah, this actually warrants some investigation. And because of that, the company really looked at the way they worked. The city did too. And eventually, through a number of different actions after that, they were shut down.
One of the things that you've sort of made people do is open their eyes to what's going on around them. You talk about Manhattan is technically an island, but it's not an island. Someone lives downstream, so if you're sending your garbage from Manhattan and you think no one can see it, it is affecting the lives in the South Bronx.
It's that concept of away. We're throwing things away. It's just because it's out of sight doesn't mean it's out of mind, and it certainly doesn't mean it's out of the air, out of the the way that we deal with it. It certainly becomes a tax burden on everything. And so helping people to see the interdependence of it all, of all the systems within a municipality, is really important, I think, from just a peace standpoint. If we really start to understand that everything we do has an impact on somebody else, and that sooner or later we're all paying for it in one way, shape, or form, whether it's through increased environmental costs or just the drain on public services. What happens to people in the community that are being affected by this? I think it's a way of helping people see within their own self-interest how, if we actually work together to come up with better strategies for these things, that everybody benefits in the long run.
I want to follow up on that in just a moment, but it's no accident that these polluting industries were dumped in the South Bronx. some people would call the fact that you had this disproportionate number of garbage dumps and power plants and sewage treatment plants environmental racism. And you choose the word environmental justice. What's the difference? Why do you use that word?
And I've even moved from environmental justice to environmental equality, because I think that, people kind of turn off when you use the word racism, and I think even justice sort of implies sometimes that there's someone's taking it away from someone else. But I think equality, everybody thinks that that's actually a good thing. So for us, it's all about, going back to the previous point, it's all about how do we set up a structure where everybody has a minimum quality of life that doesn't allow anyone to think that they're lacking. And I think that's where we want to get to, so that everybody can feel like they've gained something by being a part of a greater piece.
Equality, as you've said many times, is at the core of, I think, all struggles.
Right.
But I'm kind of curious to find out how this young woman who left this hometown that she wanted to escape, went to Wesleyan University, then on to New York University, earned a degree, a Master of Fine Arts, wanted to write the great American novel, and then perhaps have that turned into a movie, ended up becoming this crusader in a way. And you did this, you were the youngest of 10 children in what you've described as not an activist family.
Not at all. I mean, my family was trying to make ends meet, and we were the kind of house, my mom and dad took in a lot of other kids, from families.
What's one more when you have 10, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the way. It was just like, whatever, one more at the table. Which was strange for me, because I was like the shy one. I wasn't the athletic one, or the musically inclined one. I read a lot, and that's what I did. But one thing that I think did come up, by being in a family like that, was that you always were your brother and sister's keeper. And I think that is something that I got directly from my mom, who was just like, there's always room, to support somebody else. And I really appreciate that.
You are credited with coining the phrase and really starting this greening the ghetto movement.
Yeah.
Explain what that is and why it's so critical to how people feel, and getting back to this, it's not just environmental issues, but it's also economic issues.
Exactly.
And we all benefit.
Precisely. That the phrase that we like to use, you don't have to move out of your neighborhood to live in a better one. I love my neighborhood, despite all of its challenges. For lack of a better word, people will call it a ghetto. I still think that as you green it, both economically and environmentally, it means that people understand that they don't have to move out in order to live better. And developing real tools that allow them to, both of those things, the ecology of a place and the economy of a place, to grow and develop at a wonderful rate that nourishes people. That's what this is about. And so I love green. I love it when it comes from trees. I love it in people's pockets and in their stocks and bonds and portfolios and bank accounts. And I think the two of those things, when combined effectively, really help communities grow and build and create the kind of fabric that's strong and resistant to the kind of both ecological and economic changes that destroy communities.
In fact, you mentioned trees a moment ago, and you were inspired by a study you read that showed the impact that something as simple as planting trees can have on people, how people feel about themselves and how they behave in the world.
Yes, absolutely. There's a study that came out of the University of Illinois Laboratory for Landscape and Human Health, and I was just fascinated by this thing, because it did this study where it looked at two different parts of this housing project in Chicago. One part of it had an area that had some trees nearby, some landscaping, and the other part had none. Identical populations in this housing project, just different places. And the place that had more trees, or had trees, period, that's where the kids did better in school. There was less crime because people like to be outside and within a community more.
It encouraged community,
It encouraged
really.
community. But my absolute favorite thing, and just flipped me out the most, was hearing about that girls, preteen girls, having views of trees and being around them, it reduced their desire to engage in risky behaviors that would often lead them to becoming pregnant at a young age. And I still, to this day, just could not believe that, but that's why they did a study. Yeah, and I just thought, wow, if there was ever a reason, that's it. And then to find out about all the other ecological reasons for it, from stormwater management to air quality improvement, what that could do to reduce a municipality's load on their water treatment system, things like that. Then I thought, what's there not to like? I mean, really, come on.
I think one of the most brilliant things that your nonprofit, Sustainable South Bronx, did was involve the community in the solution.
Yes.
You trained them for the jobs in greening the Bronx.
Yeah.
And as a result, there was a pride and an ownership that there wouldn't have been if people from outside came in and did it for them.
Well, we saw people from outside coming in and doing it, and it was just like, we've got a 25% unemployment rate. Like, is this something that we could train folks in our communities to do? And then coupled with the research that we knew that working with plants had this impact on people, we thought, okay, that's very needed considering the trauma of poverty that people in our community experience on a daily basis. We wanted them to have that kind of social healing associated with it. And then the other piece was, we wanted them to have a financial stake in improving the ecological quality of life in their own communities. And we knew that that would provide a sense of ownership that allowed them to think of themselves as leaders.
And the solution to our astronomical incarceration rate is jobs.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your BEST program, Best Environmental Stewardship Training Program.
Right. It started because we knew that we needed to get people involved in that kind of work. And we also believe that the best form of social service is a job. And considering that most of the unemployed folks within our community suffered from either being in and out of the criminal justice system or with being born into the social welfare system. And that kind of those barriers to unemployment, because they are significant barriers to that, we knew that if we could work with those populations, train them, give them a sense of belonging and an expertise in a specific skill, then we were going to be able to impact the levels of poverty within the community and help people see themselves as a part of the change that was actually happening around them.
Give us an idea of how this river waterfront park and 11 miles of paths and greenways has changed the way people feel in the Bronx.
When it's totally done, the South Bronx Greenway, that dedicated pedestrian path, will be about 11 miles. Right now we have got about 2, and they go specifically through the residential part of the neighborhood, which is, we wanted that because we wanted people to look out their windows, because it's lined by apartment buildings on either side, to see this lush greenery right in front of their buildings as they walked to school or wherever they were going, and see that, because we knew the kind of impact it could have. And it was always about, how do you instill a sense of pride in a community? How do you make it so that people feel as though they could go be a little more active than they were, simply because their surroundings looked a little nicer? And with the diabetes and obesity rate that we experienced, also incredibly, incredibly huge. And again, it was all about, how do you instill a sense of community pride? How do we work to build this into attracting the new kind of businesses that we want to see in the community, that would allow people to buy the things they want in their neighborhood as opposed to leaving? Because right now, most people in the neighborhood leave our neighborhood to purchase things, because there isn't a whole lot of economic activity going on that keeps people money there.
And yet the South Bronx is sort of a hub for food distribution, so there are tens of thousands of trucks coming in and out of the South Bronx spewing diesel fumes and causing one of the highest rates of asthma in the entire country.
We are one of the world's largest food distribution networks in the entire world.
And yet people are leaving the community for good quality food.
Absolutely.
I mean,
it's insane. It's insane. There's some wonderful options happening right now, but it's it's slow, and we're starting to see everything from online grocers starting to deliver in the Bronx. Definitely, we're seeing an influx of farmers markets, which has been very helpful, especially since they also take food stamps, which is wonderful, and provides help for upstate farmers as well as, you know, helps with the food desert situation there as well. So little things are happening, but there are other opportunities as well.
You know, the pace of things is something that interests me, because you said we can build an ugly building almost overnight,
Yeah.
and yet to build a waterfront park takes years. I think that's 5 years in the making.
It was. Yeah, actually, well, more like 8, but it did. I mean, there were plenty of ugly buildings that were built in that that time period. Yeah, that's okay.
Now, we were talking about food a moment ago, and the New Yorker magazine just had an article about an urban garden, kids garden, and some $300,000 worth of food was produced in 1 year.
Wow.
In the South Bronx. You're interested in food in another way. You're talking about branding nationally produced food that was produced by folks in the Bronx.
Yeah,
South Bronx.
I'm actually more interested in food manufacturing and food preparation, because I think there's going to be more jobs, and the industry in and of itself is growing in urban areas. So it just makes sense that, you know, wherever the food is produced and grown, where it's manufactured, you know, because people are moving more toward prepared foods. I mean, the kind of thing people would cook a lot at home. Now people are going for prepared foods. Somebody's doing that preparing. Those are jobs. We're going to see there is definitely that's going on the upswing in terms of economic development around food. So we really are very interested in providing incentives to support the development of food-based industries within the Bronx and other urban areas around the city, around the country.
Now, you started in 2001 and led the Sustainable South Bronx. You left not that long ago to start a for-profit consulting firm. What can you do in a for-profit consulting firm that perhaps you couldn't do with a nonprofit? I guess I'm wondering what motivated you to leave when you were making good things happen.
Oh, I was, but I wanted more flexibility. I wanted to try out some models, and I also wanted to see if the kind of work that I was doing in the South Bronx, what kind of legs it had outside of it, and pleasantly surprised. I mean, actually not that surprised that it's the kind of work that we did in the South Bronx had the legs that I thought it did, but I wanted to be sure. And so, and especially in terms of coming up with different strategies and looking around to see what else was happening, now we're taking the work that we did, building on that, and we're moving directly into real estate development and building a whole new model around that.
You said in that TED Talk back in 2006 that you have embraced your inner capitalist.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there's nothing wrong with doing good things, I guess, and making money as well.
No, I want everybody to make money. And I think that unfortunately when people don't, that's when bad things happen, you know, and I think that the most effective form of social service is a job, because I think there's dignity in work, and people feel better about themselves and share that when when they're doing something that actually obliges them to be a part of society.
How do you feel when the few critics say, but you sold out? You got your credibility working in the South Bronx, and now you no longer represent us.
I would ask them, why do they think I don't represent them? And if there's a question about, like, look, I make my money, most of it, almost all of it, outside of New York. My office is still there. I make major investments there. I pay taxes there. I hire people from there. And my work is still being built on there. And have I taken, you know, the work that I do, have I spread that message? Absolutely. That also reflects on the South Bronx. This is what the South Bronx has produced. And it's all about how do you create these models and build on them. And if I represent something that's good, and then I'm also serving as a model for other folks in my community and communities like that, if that's what being a sellout is called, of helping to create
then
jobs,
you're happy to be a sellout.
then call me whatever you want. I really don't care.
You have inspired so many people. Your TED Talk, for example, has been viewed all over the world. I'm wondering who inspires you?
Oh, I am such a lucky woman because I have so many people to inspire me. I mean, everyone, people in my community inspire me because they work so hard and just respond to good things because they want desperately to see that, to know that the things they thought or they've been told about their community aren't true. And when they see it happening, how happy they are, and to know that they are actually responsible for these things, these changes happening too, because I'm inspired by them to do the best that I can, and I think they are also inspired by me to do that. So it's like this beautiful kind of cyclical relationship. And just in other people, my husband continuously inspires me to recognize that even when I'm tired, I can still do what I need to do. My team, there's so many of my mentors, some of whom have passed away, like Yolanda Garcia, who was actually one of the early awesome, South Bronx activists who decided that they were going to stay and rebuild the South Bronx from the ashes. Just literally the person who got me involved in this work, and it was her example that I followed.
All right.
I still do.
Majora Carter, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Majora Carter. Comcast subscribers can watch this program anytime on Penn State On Demand. Find out how through our website, conversations.psu.edu, where you'll also find more information on the Penn State Public Media documentary, Water Blues, Green Solutions, which features Majora as narrator. I'm Patty Satalia. We hope you'll join us for our next Conversation from Penn State.
Production funding provided in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you. Thank you. This has been a production of WPSU.